Hello, welcome to Mushabbar. Lockdown or not locking down? What is the good strategy? What do you think? Please write your comments in the comment section under this video in the YouTube channel. This will help me to understand what you think and what are your views, what is your point of views. As you know that most of the countries in the world, they have implemented some kind of lockdown to tackle with this coronavirus situation. The most rigid form of lockdown was implemented by China, and about 3 or 4 months ago I said in one of my videos that no other country may be able to implement such a rigid form of lockdown, especially no Western country will be able to do that. And that is exactly what happened. And now you see the number of confirmed coronavirus cases in the whole Western world and compare it with the China. And one of the reason may be that the Western world is not able to implement a rigid form of lockdown as it was done by China. I think it is impossible to do that in the Western world. What do you think? Anyhow, most of the countries in the world, they have implemented some kind of lockdown, whether rigid or not rigid. But there are countries like Sweden and Belarus, they have not implemented any lockdown. Actually, Belarus is on the extreme side. They are doing about nothing. But Sweden, they have at least made some kind of rules and regulations. They have not implemented lockdown just like other European countries, but they have given us some recommendations and they have made some rules. And basically, there are two main principles. Number one is that they have banned all big gatherings that involve more than 50 people at one place at a single time. Number two is that they have recommended that the elderly people and the people who fall in a risk group, which are basically those people who are sick or have some kind of disease, those people should stay inside their homes. They should not go out. They should self-isolate. And for rest of the population, they have recommended to use common sense. They have recommended to take whatever are the necessary steps to protect themselves and to protect others. They have recommended to do whatever is needed on a voluntary basis. So basically in Sweden, everything is open. All the shops are open, all the schools are open, all the companies are open. At least there's no restriction from the government or from the authorities. Yes, some of the companies have taken voluntary steps to implement, for example, remote working. Remote working or working from home was a common phenomena in Sweden even prior to coronavirus crisis. But now even more and more people are working from homes and from remote places. But these steps have been taken on voluntary basis. Other Nordic countries such as Denmark, Norway and Finland, they have implemented lockdown. So what do you think? Was the Swedish step good or not? Or if the other Nordic countries, are they foolish or not? Other Nordic countries such as Norway, Denmark and Finland, or if they are taking the wrong steps, which one is good strategy? What do you think? If you ask me, then my answer is that there is not a single strategy that can work for the whole world across the board. There is no single solution that can work in all kind of circumstances and all kind of scenarios. So I think every country and the authorities within those countries, they have to think about their local environment. They have to think about their local circumstances. They have to think about the population density. They have to think about the culture, the ways of working, the habits of the people. And they have also to think about the economy. And after considering all these factors and by conducting some kind of risk assessment, they should decide what is good for their country. So there is not a single strategy that can work in all the countries across the board. So I think Swedish authorities may have done some kind of risk assessment. They may have considered all these factors, and probably after that they have implemented this strategy. If you think about Sweden, Sweden has a big geography. The population is about only 10 million. Most of the Swedes, they live in the suburban areas or in the countryside. The population is scattered all over the geography, all over the big geography. So it is not thickly populated. It is not as thickly populated as, for example, Italy and France and Germany and many other countries. Also, most of the Swedes, they live in isolation by default. What I mean by that is that there is a huge number of people in Sweden. Actually, I heard that more than 50% of people, they are single households, meaning that only one person is living in a one flat or house. That means they are living in isolation by default. Also, most of the Swedes, they are a bit conservative. They don't meet strangers. They don't meet with other people so often. And also, even prior to coronavirus, even if they get normal sick or cough or flu, they normally isolate themselves. They don't go to offices. They work remotely from homes. So I can say that most of the Swedish population, they live in isolation by default. So you do not need to implement a lockdown in Sweden because there is a lockdown by default. Yes, I know that the situation in cities, actually in some parts of the cities is different, and that is due to immigrants, because Sweden recently has seen a lot of immigrants. They came from all over the world, and they have different kind of culture and ways of living. Also, they are living in a thickly, densely populated areas. Swedes don't live in those areas. And also in those areas, maybe they are like 5 to 10 people, they are living in single house or single flat. So the problems is in the big cities. But if you think about Sweden as a whole, then probably the strategy is good enough. But if you think about cities, then I think it's not going to be good for cities. Already there are more than 2,000 people have died in Sweden, and I think most of these deaths are from cities and probably from the immigrants. Yes, I know that many of the deaths are from elderly people, but if you ignore elderly people, then probably the rest of the deaths, at least majority of them, are from the cities and from these areas. And also these people have a different kind of culture, background. They also don't speak the local language in Sweden. That means they have a communication gap, so they don't know how to protect themselves against this coronavirus situation. So I think even though the Swedish strategy is probably good in comparison with other countries, I think Sweden could do even better. They should have implemented some kind of granular strategy, meaning that they could have implemented different strategy for suburban areas and also for on the countryside. But for the cities, especially in thickly populated areas in the cities, they should have implemented a different kind of strategy, because people living in those areas have different kind of habits. These are two different environments. A single strategy cannot work across the board. So I think Sweden normally is used to implement same strategy across the board, but I think they should change their strategy. They should try to implement a granular strategy or something called like a smart lockdown. So there should be a different strategy in those areas which has seen a lot of confirmed coronavirus cases in comparison with those areas where they have not seen any coronavirus cases or less coronavirus cases. I think these strategies should not be static. They should be dynamic. They should change on daily basis based on the results and based on the new outcomes. If I compare Sweden with the rest of the Nordic countries, which has implemented opposite strategy than Sweden, they have implemented the lockdown. Then if I compare the number of confirmed coronavirus cases, then I don't see a big difference, because the population in the Nordic countries is roughly 50% less than Sweden, and they have roughly 50% less confirmed coronavirus cases. So in terms of confirmed coronavirus cases, there's not a huge difference. So probably the Swedish strategy as a whole is working fine, but they have problem with the number of deaths. The number of deaths is terrible in Sweden if you compare with their neighbors. So I personally think the Swedish authorities should rethink about their approach, and they should implement some kind of granular approach, and they should try to improve their strategy. But there is no right or wrong strategy. At this time, I think everybody is testing and doing trials. And the reason for that is that this is a new virus. We have not seen this virus in the past. The last time that this kind of epidemic happened, that was about 100 years ago due to Spanish flu. Since this is a new virus, there are many unknowns. That means we don't know what is the good strategy. So I think in these scenarios, the countries should implement flexible strategies, and they should change depending on the circumstances. And then they should hope for the best. We will only know which country did best or which country has implemented good strategy after we have come out from all this coronavirus crisis that could happen after 1 year. So until that time, we will never know which country is doing better or not. Because these results that we have in different websites like in Worldometers, these results are not very trustable. Some countries may be very good in reporting their coronavirus cases, but some other countries may not have enough resources to actually implement all the processes and procedures to register these confirmed cases and death cases. So I think we cannot rely on these stats. But the important thing or the important message from this video is that there's not a single strategy that can work across the globe. For example, the Swedish strategy cannot work in Pakistan because Pakistan is a different world, Sweden is a different world, demography is different, the culture is different, the economy factor is different, everything is different. And all the countries, they have to consider all these factors, and then they should conduct some kind of risk assessment. They should try to balance the number of deaths maybe against the cost or economical losses, because if the country is going to go for a lockdown, then maybe in some countries more people will die due to lockdown than due to coronavirus. So there is some kind of balance that is needed. So I think there's not easy answer to this question, which strategy is good or bad. And what you think Sweden would have done better? What you think Sweden should do now in order to reduce these deaths, because these deaths looks terrible. So that is all from today. See you next time. Bye bye.